Welcome to the NWR Resources Series. My name is, Virtual Resources Series, I should say. My name is Kerry Stevenson. I am your host, and joining me today is Lee Courier. He is the CEO of NexGen Energy. And as it says on the slide there, delivering clean energy of the future. It's about uranium, which is one of my favorite topics right now. Lee, great to see you. Thanks for joining us at the virtual series today. Over to you to tell us the story, because it is really great what you guys are doing over there.
Oh, terrific, and absolute pleasure to be on the show and the opportunity to convey all the exciting things that NexGen Energy is doing. For those new to the story, NexGen incorporated in 2011 and really is a team of directors and an executive that had a long experience in the mining sector, from exploration right through to production and reclamation. And we got together and wanted to go and find a world-class uranium project. We put together an incredible land package in the Athabasca Basin, northern Saskatchewan in Canada, and set out exploring. And what we actually achieved was we discovered what is now considered to be not just tier one, but the one. It's the world's largest, highest grade uranium deposit in an elite technical setting with elite environmental performance. And it will account for about 20% of the world's production when it goes into operation in the mid to latter part of this decade. And delivering the clean energy of the future, well, I think there's no better objective there in terms of, what's facing the planet and what's the number one priority. It is a clean environment. And with the heavy usage of electrification and only getting bigger with electric cars being produced and people's reliance on electricity, delivering nuclear energy is the baseload objective there, and incredibly important in achieving the climate goals that every major country is committing to. They're forward-looking statements. I encourage everyone to read this, and it's located on our website. But just getting right into it, I mentioned before, the asset is a strategic generational asset. Just incredible economic power of the project. It went in production, and I'll go through the figures later part of this presentation, but when in production, the asset alone will take us into the top 15 of all mining companies worldwide based on an after-tax free cash flow basis. And that's at $50 a pound uranium. At 75, 100, well, we'll be knocking on the door of the top 5 mining companies worldwide, and it'll be coming from a single asset, which is one of the tiniest underground operations globally with the most elite environmental and ESG profile. We have a highly experienced management team with a proven track record of success in mining, covering all aspects of the mining life cycle. We have an incredibly strong and well-respected shareholder base, including Li Ka-shing and Queen's Road Capital out of Hong Kong. Li Ka-shing being one of the world's richest individuals. And a lot of people are surprised when we talk about a shareholder base for a company that's not yet in production. But I think that's good for investors on two fronts, not only validation as to where nuclear is going and the investment opportunity, but also the confidence and the due diligence that NexGen and the team's been through with investors of this caliber coming on board at such an early stage of our development. We have a very exciting period ahead of us. We've already established that we have the resource and the project in the resources sector, and we've de-risked it. And what's in front of us is purely execution on our part, and we're really excited about that and delivering the various achievements that we have in front of us. Just on clean global electrification, as I said earlier, no bigger objective than that currently faces the world. And 90% of the uranium that's consumed by countries have actually no uranium production themselves. Hence, it's highly subject to geopolitical risks. USA is currently the world's largest consumer and will be into the 2030 decade. The growth areas are the Asian Pacific region, in the Middle East as well. But with Biden getting in, you saw a recommitment to the Paris Agreement, and all of those reactors in the US that were scheduled to close during this decade are going to remain open now because they're currently undergoing license extensions. And we've already seen the effect of Illinois state government putting in policies to ensure that their nuclear reactors have long, healthy lives ahead of them. Moving forward, this really does put it in perspective. Tesla currently produce 500,000 electric vehicles annually. And given their power source, whilst they're charged and using electricity, a lot of that electricity is still sourced from carbon emitting power sources. The uranium industry fuels reactors globally, which actually remove over 500 million car equivalents a year. Now, NexGen's Arrow project is going to remove the equivalent of 70 million vehicles a year in itself. And so it's quite amazing when you consider Tesla producing 500,000 conduits of electricity in the vehicles, currently has a market capitalization around 600 billion US. NexGen's going to do 140 times that of taking off CO2 equivalents per year. And we're not quite at 600 billion just yet. In fact, we're about 200 times or 1/200th of that valuation as we speak. So that is the opportunity ahead for all investors. And look, I've just put up some quotes here or news headlines. And look, coming from Australia, I think there's no tougher public opinion market in the world with respect to nuclear than Australia. But I've been incredibly encouraged, particularly over the last 6 months, what I've been seeing from the UK, from the US, from France, from Japan, and Australia. And I saw an article on the weekend, a news poll, where 82% of those surveyed supported a small modular reactor industry developed in Australia. Now, I think 5 years ago, that would have been 82% against, but I think that is a reflection of the general acceptance of, if you want clean air energy, you have to have nuclear as a key component of that. And the UK government has come out and said by 2035, the entire production source of power in the UK is going to be coming from nuclear and renewables. So it's moving in that direction, and there's no alternative. And the goal of having clean air environment around the world is absolutely paramount. Now, going into what does that mean for the uranium market? Well, we are going into a paradigm shift. The uranium industry has been dominated by periods of like a decade or so of underinvestment in mines. And then you get these periods that go for quite some time where the price reacts very, very strongly due to that demand and supply squeeze. The last one we saw occurred in 2004. After a decade of very low prices, the uranium price went from $10 a pound to $140 a pound within a 4-year period. And that purely reflects that mines that go through their cycle eventually get higher cost to produce from for a given quantity, but the actual quantity itself depletes as well. And when you have a situation like that, the only consequence is a much higher price in order to encourage new mines to come on. But with uranium mines, or any mine for that matter, you just can't flick a switch and get production ramped up to meet demand. It takes time and it takes investment, and there's a lot of aspects to mining. And so the uranium mine market can never react quickly, and the consequence is that you see far higher prices for a very long period of time. And we're just about entering into that as we speak. A lot of people have said what's happening, going forward with respect to demand and supply. Well, with respect to the Rook 1 Arrow project that's under development by NexGen, NexGen's 30 million pounds, the amount of pounds that the project is capable of producing annually is not even going to meet the production which is coming offline between now and when NexGen goes into production in the middle to late part of this decade. But what's happening on top of that is that the demand curve is constantly growing, and the use of secondary supplies is getting consumed and the level of secondary supplies is getting lower and lower. So by when the middle to late part of this decade, the world's actually going to need 3 to 4 arrows, not just Arrow. And so all of those uranium companies that are doing development work for projects that are in Saskatchewan, in Australia, in South Australia, you've got Boss Resources, you've got Toro Energy in Western Australia, Denison in Saskatchewan here in Fission. Those companies have been around for decades and have been doing a lot of the work that's necessary to be able to meet this demand and supply gap that we have in front of us. The Arrow project, and we have there the Elite Arrow project, and it's elite in a number of aspects, not just economically, which I'll go through, but also environmentally and socially as well. The three key elements from a technical perspective is that the Arrow project is very low cost. It's going into production no matter what the pricing cycle of uranium is at the time, because it's on the bottom end of the global cost curve. And that's even incorporating the new elite standards for environmental mine management that we've incorporated into the project. It's got a very long life. It's a multi-decade project.
Sorry to interrupt you, Lee. What do you mean by the new elite standard? What is that? What's that that's come in?
So the design metrics that we've put into the project means that it'll be the most environmentally elite project in mining from a point of view of how it impacts the environment. It has a very, very benign impact on the environment. And one of the aspects is that we're going to have an underground tailings management facility where we're basically building purpose-built chambers to store the tailings back underground. So very shortly after all mining's all said and done in many, many decades from now, within a short period of time following the cessation of operations, you'll be hard pressed to know that there was ever a mine in the area. And now that's new, that's elite. It comes at a higher capex, a higher opex, but it's all in line with our objective of having this as the most environmentally elite mine on the planet. And jurisdiction. This is very, very important as well. You can have really good assets, but sometimes the political jurisdiction can be problematic. NexGen, well, we're located in Saskatchewan, #1 in the world for mining investment opportunity, continually ranked as #1 in the world. They also have a 30+ year uranium mining environment. The regulatory understanding of uranium mining in the province is second to none. And also from a federal perspective, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission have been administering the production of uranium for many, many decades. And so it's a great place to be. I actually traveled halfway around the planet to focus on the area, given its mineral wealth, but also the regulatory code that Saskatchewan administers so incredibly well. Going forward onto the economics of the project. Well, this is at $50 a pound US, and so basically where we are today. And as I said before, at a $50 uranium price over the life of the mine, this project at just over $1 billion after tax cash flow, and all these numbers are in Canadian dollars, would place us into the top 15 mining companies worldwide, coming from a single asset, which is one of the tiniest mines on the world with the most elite ESG profile. it has a $1.3 billion capex, but at $50 a pound, that's paid back within 0.9 of a year, so around 11 months. And as I said before, producing around 30 million pounds per annum. Now, I've provided a bit of sensitivity there, and I've shown from $50 a pound, which is that base case which we mentioned, going right up to $100 a pound. Now, the last cycle, the spot price went to $140 a pound.
Okay.
And what the point we want to make here is, not only does the project have enormous leverage to a $10 increase in the uranium price, but the average contracting price during the last cycle was actually in the mid to high 70s. And the difference between now and what happened previously, when the price went from $10 a pound to $140 a pound, you saw the long-term contracts average out in that mid to high 70s price level. Well, the top 5 mines that were in production back then, they're no longer in production today. And the contracting price normally reflects what the average, what is the incentive price for those top level mines. So what I'm saying is, I personally believe that the uranium price is actually going to go a lot higher on a spot basis than what we saw last time. And you're going to see that average contracting level actually be at a far higher price as well, because it's purely reflecting that the status of current mine production is not as strong, or it doesn't have the outlook that we had back in 04 to 08, when prices even went to $140 a pound. So it's a very exciting early innings for the uranium market that we're currently approaching.
Lee, you mentioned earlier that you're going to go into production towards the end of this decade, and clearly there will be pressure. My question to you is a little bit different. Can you make that go faster? In other words, I know you want to do things right. I know it's about environmental issues and making sure that you're the cleanest and best run mine in the world. But given the amount of demand that we see might be coming ahead for uranium, is there any way that you can ramp that up a bit quicker?
Yeah, well, based on our current schedule, it's the middle to latter part of this decade. So we actually, based on our current schedule, are very, very confident that we'll be, in closer to the middle part of the decade as opposed to the latter. And we are going at an optimal rate in the long-term interests of the project, and that's what we're very, very focused on. That also reflects our confidence as to where we see the uranium price going, based on our assessment of current production and its outlook, and potential production and based on its outlook. So we are very, very focused on executing this project extremely well. We are certainly not afraid that the market's a blip. We know this market is locked in for many, many decades to come. And so, I think that really does reflect the company's confidence and understanding of the uranium market and where it's going to. I've been in this industry for 20 years now, and it's been building and building and building. And I know that production can't respond to that demand and supply curve quickly. And so I think, with respect to NexGen and this Rook 1 project, thank God we did find it back in 2014. And we are going to be getting into production in the mid to latter part of this decade, because these things do take a long, long time to get up and running. Benefit to NexGen investors is that we've been developing this for the last 8 years, and it's now at that point to now build. It's still going to take us about 42 months to build it once we commit to that. But looking at the market, that I think is even more exciting for investors, because we will be realizing a far higher price than we otherwise would have if we were in production today.
Okay, only got a couple of minutes left, Lee.
Sure. All right. Well, I'll quickly just convey a couple of these final aspects. this year, I just want to make the point that the Arrow project was actually discovered with the very first hole within a 4.5 kilometre radius. And there'd never been any drilling within a 4.5 kilometre radius when we discovered Arrow with the very first hole. And look, our exploration team, they're very, very good, obviously, but we're not that good that we found the only deposit in the area. We have a 90% left to explore just on that corridor alone, and then we've got another 8 corridors running parallel to the one that hosts Arrow, which have no exploration on them at all. We could have 10 rigs for 10 years and still not do it geological justice with respect to the extent of uranium mineralization that's on our property. Just with respect to sustainability, I mentioned before the underground tailings management facility. It is ideal for our technical setting. We have the ability to do it. As I said, it costs more to do, but it is about environmental excellence. From a social and economic benefit, there's myself with the Prime Minister of Canada, who was up at La Loche supporting the breakfast programs and the community programs that we do in that community. Down lower there is the Premier of Saskatchewan, the former Mayor Robert, and the current Mayor Georgina, and myself at NexGen's breakfast program, where we bring breakfast to the 1,150 school students in the La Loche area every day. And capital structure, 471 million shares are issued. We have about $200 million in the bank. We're well financed to do all of our programs well into 2024. And we have a very impressive list of shareholders, as I mentioned earlier. So, Kerry, I'll be quiet and open the floor to any questions that you may have.
Lee, that was an excellent presentation, and thank you so much, not just to talk about NexGen, but also the overview of the market so that people understand the fundamentals of supply and demand. So thank you for that. Let's get straight into the questions. First up is, does the current uranium demand modelling take into account the shift to electric vehicles? Because Elon Musk recently said that US electricity production needs to double by 2040.
Yeah, well, it doesn't completely. Given Elon Musk's and also Biden's commitment to having carbon neutrality of their electrical grid by 2035, all of those reactors that were scheduled to shut were taken out of the demand scenario for uranium. They are now all needing to be added back in. And as I said before, the US is the largest producer of nuclear energy. Those reactors that are now not going to close and are going to continue operation are going to have to add on to the demand scenario that we outlined.
You mentioned in a recent Livewire interview, Lee, that the unique nature of this deposit could let you line up financing that was fit for purpose and not vanilla. Can you expand a little bit on what kind of options you might consider for that financing?
Yeah, we are going to optimize the financing component of this project. I used to actually work on the other side of the fence in terms of providing finance to these types of projects. So I understand it at a very great detail. What I'm saying is we will not be required to lock up large percentages of the production just in order to obtain the debt finance to get this into production. So you're going to see a very little component of the production tied up in fixed prices, which means great news for investors that we're going to be completely leveraged to higher uranium prices going forward. And that is just purely reflecting the economic strength of the project and the very low technical risk associated with the project. It allows us to really get a financing package which is very cost efficient and within the interests of keeping maximum leverage for investors.
Lee, I'm going to take one more question and then we're going to have to call it a day because we're running out of time. Last question here. Do you think its growing appeal as an ESG investment could affect how NexGen is valued? Because you do talk about the ESG component.
Yeah, and fabulous question, and one which I'm delighted to answer. I suspect, based on all the calls that we've been receiving from ESG funds since about November of last year, when Boris Johnson came out and spoke about the importance of nuclear, Bill Gates came out and spoke about the importance of nuclear. It feels as though the general population are really taking on board the science of nuclear as opposed to a misplaced ideology from previous decades. And it is incredibly ESGable. And if nuclear gets incorporated into the European Parliament's finance taxonomy, due to go before the Parliament before the end of this year, well, the volume of ESG funds investing in the space, I think, will go up by 50-fold.
Yeah.
And it has to happen. And I think NexGen potentially, personally, I believe this, one day will be valued more on its ESG component and its carbon offsetting component than the NPV of producing and selling uranium, as we see in Tesla in my earlier slide.
Yep.
It's electrical. They're not making that much money relatively to their valuation. Their valuation reflects the ESGable component of that company. And I think NexGen is that and then some going forward.
Lee Courier, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the program today. I'm sure there's lots more questions. Ladies and gentlemen, a fantastic project in the Athabasca Basin in Canada. Right place, right time, and on the way to production. Lee Courier, thank you so much for joining us at the NWR Virtual Resources Series today.
Thank you, Kerry. Absolute pleasure.